The city of Arathis had once been a beacon of hope, a flourishing metropolis where humans and aliens coexisted in peace. But after decades of war, it now lay in ruin. Crumbling buildings and abandoned streets painted a grim picture of the past. The once great city had fallen to the control of an alien species known as the Zirathi, whose power and cruelty were unmatched. The humans who lived here were either enslaved or exiled, forced to forget their history and their power. Diana had once called Arathis home. She had been born here, raised here, and had known the warmth of the human city before it was destroyed. But that was before the day she was exiled. The day her bloodline, once revered by all, was shattered. It had been over a century since she left, and though she had wandered from world to world, she never forgot Arathis. It was only when the rebellion began to stir again in the outskirts of the city that Diana felt the pull to return. She had heard whispers of a human uprising, of the last remnants of her people fighting back against the Zirathi's hold. But her presence here was not just to fight in some battle. It was to finish what her ancestors had started, to uncover a long-buried secret that might be the only hope for the human race. Diana's return to Arathis was no accident. She had spent years preparing, changing her appearance, erasing every trace of her identity. She had adopted a new face, a new name, and a new life. She was no longer the daughter of the lost bloodline, the one the Zirathi had exiled and betrayed. She was someone else now, someone who could blend in, someone who wouldn't be recognized. At least that was her plan. The day she stepped back into the city, Diana kept her head low, cloaked in the shadows of the alleyways. The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and dust, and the once clear sky above was now a dull gray canvas. Nothing was as it had been. The towering spires of Arathis had fallen, their remains jutting into the sky like broken bones. The city was a shadow of its former self, its heart still beating, but barely. She moved quickly, keeping to the old, familiar streets, avoiding the patrols of Zirathi soldiers that roamed the city like vultures. Her heart raced as she passed the places she once knew so well, the marketplace, the old library where she had spent countless hours as a child, and the square where she had played with other children of her age. All gone now. The marketplace was now a place for the Zirathi to hold their prisoners. The library was looted and abandoned, and the square was a graveyard for those who had fallen in the rebellion. Diana felt a pang in her chest, but she ignored it. There was no time for sentimentality. She had a mission. But as Diana made her way through the ruins, a strange feeling settled over her. It was a sensation she had not experienced in years, an unsettling, prickling awareness. It was as though someone was watching her, observing her every move. Her hand instinctively moved to the hilt of the small blade she carried, her fingers wrapping around the familiar handle. She was ready for anything, but the feeling lingered. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a figure standing at the end of the street. A tall, imposing figure draped in dark robes. At first, she thought it was just another Zirathi officer, but something about this one was different. The way he stood there, motionless, as though waiting for her. Diana froze, her heart skipping a beat. There was something about him, something that felt all too familiar. The figure stepped forward, and Diana could feel the tension in the air tighten. The stranger's gaze locked with hers, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. His eyes, sharp, calculating, held a deep, unsettling knowledge. Diana knew those eyes. She had seen them once, long ago. They belonged to Lord Kale, the leader of the Zirathi forces on Arathis. Lord Kale had been the one to exile her, the one who had been responsible for her family's downfall. He had stood by while her bloodline was erased, and he had made sure that the power of her ancestors would never rise again. Diana had thought that she would never see him again, that his influence had long since faded into the shadows of history. But here he was, staring at her as if he had known she would come. Back she didn't move. She couldn't. You? Lord Kale's voice was low, but it sent a shiver down Diana's spine. I knew you would return. Diana took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she tried to mask the shock that threatened to show on her face. She had not expected this. Not now, not here. She had thought she had erased every trace of her past, but Cale's recognition shattered that illusion in an instant. You think a new face hides you? Cale continued, taking a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. I'd know the scent of your blood even after a century. Diana's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to remain calm. Her bloodline had been a thing of legend, and the scent of her blood was something no one had forgotten, especially not someone like Cale. Her blood was more than just the mark of her ancestors. It held power, a power that Cale had wanted for himself for years. He had hunted down her family one by one to erase them from history, and now he was standing before her, knowing that she was the last of them. You must be mistaken, Diana said, her voice steady but her hands trembling beneath her cloak. I'm just a traveler. Cale's lips curled into a small smile, a predator's smile. Don't lie to me, Diana, I know your scent. Your bloodline may be gone, but the essence remains. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. And now you've returned. But why? Diana swallowed, trying to control the panic rising within her. She had come to find the truth of her family's legacy, to uncover the artifact that might change the fate of both humans and Zirathi. But Cale's presence here, his recognition of her, made everything more complicated. I have no reason to speak to you, Diana said, her voice cold now, as she slowly took a step back. I've come for my own reasons. Cale's eyes darkened. Your reasons do not matter. You've come back to claim what's mine. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. And I will make sure you never leave this city again. Diana's pulse quickened. She had anticipated that the Zirathi might come after her, but not this quickly, not so soon. Lord Cale had always been a force to be reckoned with, but now he seemed more dangerous than ever. The man who had once sought to destroy her family now sought to control her, and that could never happen. Without another word, Diana turned and sprinted down the nearest alley, her heart racing in her chest. She couldn't afford to be caught, not by him, not by anyone. Cale didn't follow immediately. He didn't need to, he knew she would run. He had always known that the last of her bloodline would come back to Arathis, and now that she had returned, he could feel the pull of her power. He would wait. Diana couldn't escape her past, and neither could he. It was only a matter of time before they crossed paths again, but for now Cale was content to watch from the shadows, knowing that his prey had returned. Diana didn't look back. Her legs carried her swiftly through the ruined streets of Arathis, each step echoing in the desolate city. The familiar feeling of being hunted gripped her chest tightly, and her heart pounded harder with every breath. She had expected danger, but she had not anticipated Cale's immediate recognition. The Zirathi Lord's voice, calm yet chilling, still rang in her ears. She darted down narrow alleyways and through abandoned shops, avoiding the patrolling soldiers as much as possible. She knew these streets well, but this was different. The city had changed since she last set foot here. Many of its structures now stood as skeletons of what they once were. Yet no matter how much Arathis had fallen, its layout remained etched in her memory. It was her home, after all, even if it was a home she had been forced to leave. Still, Cale's words echoed in her mind. I'd know the scent of your blood, even after a century. How could he have known? How could he have recognized her after all these years, after she had gone to such lengths to erase every trace of her past? Diana slowed her pace as she reached the outskirts of the city. She had to catch her breath, and there was no sense in running aimlessly through the heart of Arathis. Her mission was still the same. She had to find the artifact, the ancient relic of her bloodline that had been hidden for centuries, the key to ending the war and possibly saving her people. But now, Cale knew she was here, and that meant time was no longer on her side. She pressed herself against the wall of an old building, her heart racing. Her hand brushed over the familiar hilt of her blade, the cool metal, comforting her for a moment. She had trained for years preparing for whatever she might face in Arathis, but she had never considered Kale, never thought she would have to confront him again. But now that he knew, there was no going back. Diana couldn't let him find her before she reached the artifact. If she did, everything would be lost. The bloodline's secret would be exposed, and Kale would stop at nothing to control it. Her thoughts raced as she considered her options. The outskirts of Arathis were mostly desolate, abandoned by both humans and Zirathi alike. If she could make it to the old vaults beneath the city, she might be able to find the artifact before Kale could track her down. The vaults were deep underground, hidden beneath the ruins of the original human city. They had been designed to protect the relics of the old bloodline, and Diana knew the only way to access them was through a series of tunnels known only to a few. But getting to the tunnels wasn't going to be easy. The Zirathi controlled everything, no. The silence in the underground vault was thick, suffocating. Diana's heartbeat thundered in her ears, her pulse quickening as she stood frozen in front of Lord Kale. The man who had once exiled her family, the man who had spent decades hunting down every trace of her bloodline, now stood in her path, blocking her from the very artifact she had come to find. She had hoped that the tunnels would be enough to shield her, that the ancient relic of her people would remain hidden from the eyes of those who would misuse it. But Kale's presence here proved that nothing was ever truly hidden. She had underestimated him. Worse still, she had underestimated the power of her bloodline, the way it seemed to draw him to her like a predator closing in on its prey. Diana's fingers tightened around the hilt of her blade, her grip firm, but her mind racing. She had spent years preparing for this moment, but now that it had come, she felt the weight of her ancestors' legacy bearing down on her. It wasn't just about the artifact anymore. It was about everything her bloodline had done, everything they had stood for. Kale's voice broke the silence, low and commanding. "You think you can escape your past, Diana?" His words were heavy with meaning, every syllable a reminder of the pain and betrayal of years gone by. "You can hide behind a new face, a new name, but I still know you. I know the scent of your blood, and I will never forget what your family did." Diana's breath hitched, her chest tightening as the memories flooded back. She had hoped to bury the past, to leave behind the betrayal of her ancestors, but Kale had dragged it all back to the surface. Her bloodline had once been revered, powerful, and respected, but everything had changed when her ancestors chose ambition over loyalty. They had betrayed the very people they had sworn to protect. They had sought power for themselves, and in doing so they had condemned her family to a life of exile. Diana's eyes narrowed, her voice cold as she responded. "You know nothing about me, Kale, and you know even less about my family. My bloodline is not your enemy. What happened in the past, what they did, has nothing to do with me." Kale's expression softened, just for a moment, but it was enough for Diana to catch the flicker of something beneath his calculated exterior. Regret? Remorse? It was hard to say, but in that fleeting moment Diana saw the truth. Kale had not come to destroy her. He had come to understand her, to unlock the mystery that had remained hidden for so long. "You are wrong, Diana," Kale said, his tone less threatening now, more contemplative. "I didn't come here to destroy you. I came because I need you to understand what your bloodline did to mine. You see, we were never enemies. We were once allies, fighting side by side, united in our cause. But your ancestors betrayed us. They betrayed me." Diana felt a pang of shock at his words, but she quickly masked it. She had known the history of her family, of their fall from grace, but hearing it spoken aloud by Kyle was different. She had never truly understood the depth of their betrayal, never realized how much it had cost the Zirathi. "Your family's ambition tore apart everything we had built together," Kale continued, his voice quieter now, tinged with something that sounded almost like sorrow. "I spent years hunting down the last remnants of your bloodline because I wanted to know why. Why did they betray us? Why did they turn on their allies? I thought I could destroy your legacy, wipe it from existence. But then I met you." Diana stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. What are you talking about? She demanded, the anger in her voice betraying the confusion she felt. I am nothing like them. I didn't ask for any of this. I don't even know why you're standing here, why you're making me relive this nightmare. You want me to pay for their mistakes, but I didn't make those choices. I'm not responsible. For them. Kale's eyes darkened, but there was no malice in his gaze, only the weight of years of regret and unresolved pain. I know you didn't choose this life, Diana, but your bloodline, your family's choices have shaped everything. The power you carry, the power that runs through your veins, is the key to everything. It can either save or destroy us all. And now you're the only one who can decide what happens next. The words hit Diana like a blow. The key to everything, the power to save or destroy. Was that what her bloodline had truly been about? Was that why she had been exiled? Why her family had been erased from history? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Kale's words hung heavily in the air, filling the small space between them with a sense of inevitability. Diana could feel the power of her bloodline pressing in on her, the weight of it bearing down on her shoulders. It wasn't just about the artifact anymore. It was about the legacy she carried, the choices her ancestors had made, and the choices she would have to make now. I didn't come here to claim power, Diana said quietly, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. I came to stop the war. I came to end the bloodshed. And if the artifact holds the key to that, then I will take it. But I won't use it for revenge. I won't use it for power. I'll use it to end this madness once and for all. Kale's eyes flickered, and for a moment Diana saw a flicker of something like admiration in his gaze. You're different than I thought you would be, he said softly. I thought you would be like them, power-hungry, ambitious, but you're not. Diana shook her head. I don't want to be like them. I don't want power. I want peace. For a long moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of their pasts hanging in the air. Diana could feel the tension thickening, but she also felt something else, something she hadn't expected. A strange kind of understanding. Kale took a step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. You are your family's legacy, Diana, said quietly. And whether you like it or not, your bloodline will always be a part of you. But I'm willing to help you understand what it means to carry that blood. You don't have to face this alone. Diana's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she wanted to refuse him, to push him away, to tell him that everything he had done had been for nothing. But she couldn't. She couldn't deny the pull of his words. There was something in Kale's gaze now, something that made her wonder if he had always been more than just the enemy, if he had once been the ally he claimed to be. I don't know if I can trust you, Diana said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale nodded slowly, his expression grim. I understand. But trust must be earned. And right now we both need each other. The artifact isn't just a weapon, it's a key to a future that neither of us can predict. But together, we can decide what it becomes. Diana looked at him, torn between her duty and her desire for peace. She knew she had to make a choice, and it wouldn't be an easy one. But one thing was clear. Kyle was right. Her bloodline was more than just a curse. It was a key, and it was up to her to decide what to do with it. Fine, she said finally, her voice steady, but we do this my way. No more lies. No more betrayal. Kyle smiled, a hint of respect in his eyes. Agreed. And just like that, the past was no longer a shadow they ran from. It was the future they would shape together. The weight of the past seemed to lift from Diana's shoulders as she stood beside Lord Kale, gazing out at the ruins of Arathis. The city, once a symbol of hope, now lay in tatters, but within those ruins something powerful lingered. Diana could feel it in her bones, an ancient force that had been waiting for centuries to be awakened. Together, they had reached an understanding. Kyle, the Zerathi lord who had once hunted her family to extinction, now stood beside her, their fates intertwined in a way neither of them could have predicted. Diana had chosen to trust him, despite the shadows of the past that clung to both their histories. In return, Cale had pledged to help her find the artifact, an ancient relic of her bloodline that held the power to change the course of the war. But now, the real challenge awaited them. The artifact was hidden deep within the heart of the enemy's stronghold, an impenetrable fortress controlled by the Scifi elite. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but it was a risk Diana was willing to take. The rebellion needed the artifact to stand a chance against the Scifi forces, and Cale had promised that together they could bring peace to a world torn by conflict. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in an eerie glow, Cale turned to Diana, his expression serious. "We leave at dawn. The longer we wait, the more likely the Scifi will reinforce the stronghold. We need to act quickly." Diana nodded, her mind racing with the plan they had devised. It wasn't a perfect plan, and there were many unknowns, but it was the best chance they had. They would infiltrate the stronghold, avoid detection, and retrieve the artifact before the Scifi could use it for their own purposes. The stakes were high, but Diana knew there was no turning back now. As the two of them prepared for the journey ahead, Diana's thoughts turned inward. The decision to ally with Cale had been difficult, but it had been the right one. She had seen a side of him that few others had. Cale wasn't the ruthless conqueror she had once believed him to be. He was a man shaped by his past, driven by a need for redemption just as she was. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Diana asked quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I mean, what if we fail? What if we're walking into a trap?" Cale turned to face her, his eyes softening. "We're doing the best we can, Diana. That's all we can ever do. As for the Scifi commander stepped forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the chamber. Diana's grip on her blade tightened as the air around her seemed to freeze. Cale stood beside her, his eyes narrowing as the trap snapped shut around them. The cold, calculating smile of the commander revealed the truth. They had been led here intentionally. "You're wasting your time," the commander said, his voice smooth like oil, each word dripping with arrogance. "You thought you could come here, take the artifact, and walk away unscathed. But this is my domain, and you're just a pawn in a game you don't understand." Diana's breath caught in her throat as her mind raced. The artifact, the relic she had fought so hard to find, was now a symbol of their failure. She had hoped for peace, for a way to end the war. But now it seemed that the conflict was only about to escalate further. Cale stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "You think we didn't know? That we didn't know this place was a trap? I've walked into worse than this, Commander, and I'll walk out whether you like it or not." The commander chuckled, a dark sound that sent chills down Diana's spine. "Bold words, Cale, but you're out of time. The Scifi don't tolerate betrayal, and neither will I." Before Diana could react, the chamber's heavy door slammed shut with a deafening noise, sealing them inside. The room seemed to grow darker, the walls closing in on them. A low hum filled the air, the unmistakable sound of energy weapons charging. Diana's heart raced. There was no way out, no easy escape. But despite the overwhelming odds, she refused to show fear. She was a survivor, a product of a bloodline that had fought and bled for survival. And even in the face of this trap, she wouldn't give in. "We can still end this," Diana said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "You don't have to do this. We can stop the war. We can end the bloodshed." The commander's eyes gleamed with malice. "The war will end when I say it does. And it will be on my terms, not yours." Diana's mind raced as she scanned the room, looking for any weakness, any opportunity to turn the tide. Her gaze fell on the pedestal where the artifact stood, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. She could sense its power, feel it calling to her. It was both a weapon and a key, and it was the key to everything. But she had no idea how to control it or if she could. Cale, sensing her hesitation, stepped closer. "We've been in worse situations than this, Diana. Together we can find a way out." Diana nodded, her grip on her blade tightening. We fight. We don't give up. The commander's laugh echoed through the chamber. Fight? You think you can stand against me? Against the full might of the Zirathi? You're nothing but insects to me. With a flick of his wrist, the commander signaled to his soldiers, and a dozen Zirathi guards stepped forward, weapons drawn. Their energy weapons hummed ominously, their presence like a wall closing in on them. Diana and Cale were outnumbered, trapped in the heart of enemy territory, and yet, they stood resolute. Cale, Diana said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you trust me? Cale's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was an understanding between them, a silent promise that they would do whatever it took to survive. I trust you, he said simply. Always. Diana nodded, her hand reaching for the artifact. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. They couldn't lose this fight. If they did, the future of both their people would be doomed. With a swift movement, she reached out and touched the artifact. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her, unlike anything she had ever felt before. The room seemed to pulse with the power of the relic, and for a brief moment, she felt like she was part of something larger than herself. The walls around her seemed to shake, the hum of energy growing louder as the artifact's power awakened. The Zirathi guards stepped back, confusion flashing across their faces. They had not expected this. The commander, too, seemed caught off guard, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. No, he snarled. You don't understand what you're doing. You're unleashing something beyond your control. Diana could feel the power surging through her, but she also felt a strange sense of clarity. The artifact wasn't just a weapon, it was a key, a bridge between the two worlds. It could either heal the rift between the humans and the Zirathi, or tear everything apart. Cale stepped forward, his eyes locked on the commander. We understand perfectly. The time for your tyranny is over. With that, Cale launched himself at the commander, his movements swift and deadly. The Zirathi leader raised his weapon to strike, but Cale was faster. Their blades clashed with a sharp metallic sound, and for a moment, Diana could hear nothing but the ringing of steel on steel. Diana, still holding the artifact, felt the surge of energy building within her. It was as if the very essence of her bloodline was awakening, calling her to do something she didn't fully understand. But she couldn't hesitate. Not now. Diana, Cale shouted, his voice strained. We need to act now. With a deep breath, Diana stepped forward, focusing on the artifact's energy. She had to trust in herself, in the power of her bloodline, and in the choices she had made. She closed her eyes and let the energy flow through her, letting it guide her hand. A brilliant burst of light erupted from the artifact, filling the chamber with blinding energy. The Zirathi soldiers were thrown back, their weapons disintegrating in the light. The commander screamed in fury, but it was too late. The power of the artifact had overwhelmed him, and in a flash, his weapon was no more. The room fell silent. Diana opened her eyes, her heart still racing as she looked around the chamber. The Zirathi soldiers lay unconscious on the ground, their weapons destroyed. The commander, too, was lying motionless, his eyes wide in shock. Cale stood beside her, panting from the battle but unharmed. You did it, he said, awe in his voice. Diana looked down at the artifact in her hands, the light now dimming. She didn't feel powerful. She felt exhausted, drained. But she had done it. They had won. The war was not over, but this was a victory, a sign that change was possible. The artifact had given them a chance, but the future would still depend on the choices they made. They had faced the darkness together, and together, they had emerged victorious. We can still stop this, Diana said, her voice steady once more. We can still change everything. Kyle nodded, his expression resolute. We will. We have to. As the light from the artifact faded, Diana felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The battle was not over, but it had begun to turn in. their favor. And for the first time in a long while, she felt hope stir in her heart. Together, they had fought. And together, they would continue to fight for the future of both their people. The sound of heavy breathing filled the chamber, mingling with the faint hum of the artifact's energy as its power began to fade. Diana stood motionless, still holding the relic in her hands, feeling the last remnants of its energy drain away. It had been the key to their victory, but now, in the aftermath, all she could feel was an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. Beside her, Kale wiped the sweat from his brow, his face still set in a grim expression. The battle had been fierce, but it was over, for now. The Zirathi forces lay scattered around the room, incapacitated by the force of the artifact's energy, their weapons destroyed in the wake of the blast. The commander they had faced, the one who had orchestrated this trap, now lay unconscious. "His power broken? Is it really over?" Diana whispered, her voice hoarse from the intensity of the moment. Kale looked at her, his eyes tired but resolute. "No, the war isn't over, but this is a turning point." His voice was steady, filled with a sense of both finality and determination. "We've broken their stronghold. We've proven that they can be defeated. Now, we take the fight to them." Diana nodded, but the weight of Kale's words settled heavily on her shoulders. The war was far from over, and the Zirathi still controlled most of the planet. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. This victory, small as it seemed in the grand scheme of things, had given them a chance to fight for a future that didn't have to be defined by bloodshed and hatred. She glanced down at the artifact, now no longer glowing with the powerful energy it had once held. Its surface was smooth, unassuming, as if it had never been a source of such immense power. But Diana knew better. The artifact had changed everything. It had given them a weapon, yes, but it had also given them something more, something intangible. It had given them the strength to believe that they could change the course of their world, to believe that peace was still possible. Kale stepped closer to her, his expression softening for a moment. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. Diana met his gaze, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. She had grown to trust him, to understand him in ways she never thought possible. Kyle, the ruthless Zirathi lord who had once hunted her family to extinction, was no longer the man she had first encountered. He was someone different now, someone who had chosen to fight for a future that wasn't defined by power and domination. And in that, she saw a reflection of herself. "I'm fine," she said, though the weariness in her voice betrayed her. "We've won, Kale. But we still have so much more to do." Kale nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We do. But we've taken the first step, and that's all that matters right now." Diana turned her attention back to the unconscious commander lying on the floor. His eyes were closed, his